The neon glow of a Los Angeles Walmart parking lot, usually a beacon of convenience and routine, took on an eerie cast one humid summer night, under a clouded sky. When most of the city's denizens were home or on their late-night errands, a single, unsuspicious parking garage became the stage for a crime that would forever stain the memories of those who witnessed it. It began as any other night at the supercenter. Cars idled in neat rows under flickering fluorescent lights, while shoppers hurried across the lot, clutching paper bags and exchanging nods with familiar faces. At around 11:42 p.m., as a cool breeze rustled through the palms planted along the lot's edge, a low, almost imperceptible sound disrupted the ambient hum, a quiet metallic clink, like the sound of a dropped object. It was so subtle that few noticed, but for security guard Marcus Rivera, whose nightly rounds had taught him to trust his instincts. Stopping near the far end of the parking garage, Marcus peered into the shadows behind a row of parked sedans. There, on the cold concrete, lay the body of a man, his face contorted in a silent scream, eyes staring blankly at the sky. Next to him, a crumpled slip of paper, stained with dark blotches of blood, bore a single message: silence is the cost. Marcus's heart hammered as he radioed for backup. Within minutes, police cruisers converged on the scene, their red and blue lights reflecting off wet asphalt. Detective Laura Mitchell, a seasoned investigator with the Los Angeles Police Department known for her methodical approach, arrived amid the growing commotion. Stepping under the harsh glare of the streetlights, she surveyed the scene, a body carefully positioned near an access door to the parking structure, no signs of a struggle around him, and the enigmatic note lying within his grasp. Mitchell's trained eyes catalogued every detail: the way the man's limbs were arranged, the faint trail of blood leading from the body to a half-open security gate, the absence of any personal belongings that might indicate a struggle. The victim was later identified as Adam Lewis, a 35-year-old accountant who worked for a local logistics company. Adam was known as a quiet, reliable man, someone who balanced meticulous spreadsheets with a genuine kindness that endeared him to co-workers. His colleagues described him as dedicated and ethical, never one to raise an eyebrow at minor discrepancies in the books. Yet, as Mitchell soon discovered, Adam had been quietly pursuing a line of inquiry that few others had noticed. In the days following his murder, Detective Mitchell began to piece together Adam's final hours. At his modest apartment near Koreatown, neighbors recalled seeing him leave unusually late one night, clutching a worn leather folder under his arm. Inside that folder, investigators later found a series of pages filled with detailed notes and financial records, a ledger of discrepancies that Adam had compiled over several weeks. His notes spoke in hushed, anxious tones about irregular transfers and missing funds in the company's accounts. One page, written in precise cursive, noted, "When the numbers don't match, someone is taking a piece of the pie. I must follow the money even if it leads to danger." The implication was clear: Adam had discovered something unsettling within the financial operations of his employer. As Detective Mitchell delved deeper into the case, she uncovered evidence that suggested Adam's investigation had threatened to expose a larger conspiracy. His employer, Horizon Logistics, was a mid-sized firm that had prided itself on efficiency and integrity in a competitive market. However, internal audits, long suppressed by senior management, revealed that large sums of money had been diverted from client accounts into undisclosed channels. The transfers were small enough to be hidden in the margins of daily transactions, yet over time they accumulated into staggering amounts. It appeared that someone high up in the company was orchestrating a sophisticated embezzlement scheme, and Adam's diligence had brought him perilously close to uncovering the truth. Security footage from the parking garage, retrieved from the store's surveillance system, added another layer of mystery. Grainy images captured a figure in a dark jacket, moving with deliberate intent through the lot around the time Adam was last seen. The figure's face was obscured by the brim of a hat and the angle of the camera, but the gait was unmistakable, a purposeful stride that hinted at familiarity with the area. Detective Mitchell's instincts told her that this shadowy figure was not a random intruder, but someone connected to the financial discrepancies Adam had discovered. In interviews with co-workers at Horizon Logistics, Mitchell encountered conflicting stories. Some employees recalled that Adam had grown increasingly anxious in recent weeks, often staying late and double-checking figures long after others had gone home. One young analyst confided that Adam had mentioned receiving anonymous warnings to drop his investigation, cryptic messages that alluded to paying the price for speaking out. Others described an office environment that had become noticeably tense since Adam began questioning routine transactions. Yet, despite these hints, no one had expected that such questioning would lead to murder. A breakthrough in the case came when the forensic team discovered traces of an unusual chemical, a solvent commonly used in high-security financial institutions for cleaning sensitive equipment, on a broken piece of plastic found near the security gate. The residue was not something one would expect to find in a standard parking garage, suggesting that the perpetrator had deliberately used it to wipe down surfaces, perhaps to remove evidence or to plant a clue. Detective Mitchell speculated that the chemical might have been used to erase fingerprints or other forensic traces at a specific location, a detail that hinted at premeditation and professional expertise. At the same time, digital forensic specialists managed to recover deleted emails from Adam's work computer. Among the recovered messages was a series of encrypted communications between Adam and an unknown contact who signed off only as Falcon. In one email, Adam wrote, "The trail leads deeper than I imagined. If I'm right, the figures are being laundered through offshore accounts. I fear what this might mean for all of us." Another email, partially corrupted, warned, "They are watching, keep quiet if you value your life." These messages provided a chilling confirmation that Adam's investigation had not gone unnoticed by those who benefited from the embezzlement. Detective Mitchell then shifted her focus to the higher echelons of Horizon Logistics. The company's CEO, a sharply dressed man named Robert Evans, was known for his aggressive business tactics and for maintaining an aura of impeccable professionalism. In a series of interviews, Evans vehemently denied any knowledge of financial irregularities, attributing any discrepancies to system errors and accounting oversights. However, internal documents obtained by the detective painted a different picture. A confidential audit report, leaked by a disillusioned employee, revealed that several high-value transactions had been approved by Evans himself. The report also mentioned that these approvals were accompanied by vague memos instructing managers to ensure discretion at all costs. As the investigation progressed, Detective Mitchell's list of potential suspects began to narrow. One name in particular kept resurfacing in both internal emails and whispered conversations among former employees: Daniel Martin, the company's chief financial officer. Martin was a reserved man who had risen steadily through the ranks. His calm demeanor and unwavering focus had earned him the trust of many within Horizon Logistics. Yet, several anonymous sources claimed that Martin had been under immense pressure from senior management to balance the books by any means necessary. When confronted, Martin maintained a stoic silence and offered only generic statements about financial restructuring and meeting targets. His evasiveness, combined with the fact that his signature appeared on several questionable transactions, made him a person of interest in the case. In a daring move, Detective Mitchell arranged a covert meeting with a former employee of Horizon Logistics who had recently been laid off under mysterious circumstances. The ex-employee, a mid-level accountant named Teresa Gonzalez, spoke in a low voice from a cramped diner booth. "I saw things in the ledgers that didn't add up," she confided. "There were entries for transfers to offshore accounts that I was never authorized to see. I even heard someone mention that if anyone tried to expose it, there would be consequences." Teresa's testimony, while not conclusive on its own, lent critical credence to the theory that Adam's murder was directly connected to a high-level effort to cover up a massive fraud. At the same time, the investigation uncovered an unsettling twist. Surveillance footage from a nearby street camera captured a brief glimpse of a dark sedan parked near the back entrance of the Walmart parking garage at the time of the murder. Although the images were too blurry to identify the driver, a careful analysis revealed a distinctive dent on the front bumper, a detail that later matched a repair record from a local auto body shop known to work with corporate fleets. Investigators traced the repair records to a company that had recently been contracted by Horizon Logistics for vehicle maintenance. This unexpected connection added a layer of complexity to the case. It suggested that the cover-up might have involved multiple departments within the company, coordinating their actions to ensure that any trace of Adams' investigation would be eliminated. The breakthrough that finally set the case into sharper focus came when the cyber forensics team managed to recover a nearly complete log of communications from the deleted email server of Horizon Logistics. Among the recovered files was a folder labeled Discrepancies, Q3 2022. In that folder were numerous spreadsheets and internal memos that detailed the financial irregularities Adam had been investigating. More disturbingly, the folder contained a memo with the subject Operation Quiet, a directive that outlined a plan to suppress any investigations into the missing funds. The memo mentioned that anyone who attempted to expose these discrepancies would be subject to immediate and irreversible action. This document, unsigned and untraceable to any particular individual, was the final piece of evidence that confirmed the chilling theory. Adam Lewis had been killed because he was too close to uncovering a vast network of embezzlement that involved the upper echelons of Horizon Logistics. With the mounting evidence, Detective Mitchell's team worked in tandem with federal investigators to build a case against the conspirators. A series of search warrants were executed, leading to the seizure of additional financial records and digital communications that corroborated the internal audit findings. Several mid-level managers were detained for questioning, and the pressure on the CFO, Daniel Martin, intensified. Under the weight of overwhelming forensic evidence and the damning internal memos, Martin eventually broke down in a lengthy interrogation. "I was told to adjust the numbers," he admitted, voice low and defeated. "It wasn't my idea, we were just following orders from the top. I never thought it would come to this." His confession, while it did not directly implicate the top executives, confirmed that there was an orchestrated effort to conceal the truth, an effort that had escalated to murder. In a parallel investigation, Detective Mitchell continued to pursue the trail left by the mysterious encrypted messages from Adam's computer. The alias Falcon used by the anonymous correspondent remained elusive, but a breakthrough came when a cybersecurity analyst was able to link the encrypted emails to an IP address associated with a known proxy server in downtown Los Angeles. Further analysis revealed that the IP address had been used by a local freelance financial consultant who had previously worked on several high-profile cases involving corporate fraud. When confronted, the consultant, whose name was James Laird, explained that he had been contacted by an anonymous client to provide technical assistance in covering up discrepancies. "I was just a middleman," he insisted, "nothing more than a tool. I don't know who was behind it all, but I was paid to make the numbers disappear." Laird's testimony suggested that the corruption reached further than Horizon Logistics alone, implicating a network of individuals who used their expertise to manipulate financial records and obscure illicit transactions. As the case moved toward trial, the courtroom in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with tension. The prosecution laid out its meticulously compiled evidence, a trail of digital fingerprints, forensic analyses, and eyewitness accounts that traced the path from the missing funds to the cover-up and ultimately to the murder of Adam Lewis. Detective Mitchell took the stand to recount her investigation in painstaking detail, her voice steady as she described the discovery of the body, the chilling note left behind, and the unyielding pursuit of truth that had led to the exposure of a corporate scandal of staggering proportions. Witnesses testified about the pressures within Horizon Logistics, the corporate culture that had silenced dissent, and the anonymous threats that had plagued employees who dared to ask questions. The financial auditor's testimony was particularly damning, as he walked the jury through the series of monthly transfers that had funneled money into offshore accounts, demonstrating how a seemingly insignificant discrepancy could be orchestrated into a multi-million-dollar fraud over time. The term Operation Quiet, once dismissed as corporate jargon, took on a sinister significance when the internal memo outlining the directive was introduced as evidence. Yet even as the trial delivered some measure of accountability, with several mid-level managers and the CFO being convicted, The higher echelons of Horizon Logistics managed to evade full prosecution by invoking legal technicalities and the protective shield of corporate influence. Richard Thompson, the regional manager, whose signature had appeared on the majority of the suspicious transactions, received a sentence for fraud and conspiracy, but his role as the architect of the scheme remained murky. Meanwhile, the enigmatic alias Falcon and the identity of the mastermind behind Operation Quiet were never definitively revealed, leaving a lingering question about the true depth of the corruption. Outside the courtroom, the fallout was palpable. The scandal forced public officials to launch a comprehensive review of corporate oversight practices, and legislative proposals were introduced to tighten regulations on financial reporting and executive accountability. In community centers and on local news broadcasts, citizens debated the implications of the case, a stark reminder that even institutions considered pillars of trust could harbor secrets that cost lives. The murder of Adam Lewis became a symbol of the high price of transparency in a system where power and money often conspired to silence those who dared to expose wrongdoing. For Detective Mitchell, the case was a constant, unhealed wound, a reminder that justice was often a fragmented victory. In the quiet hours after the trial, she would walk the familiar streets of Los Angeles, her mind replaying every detail of the investigation. The memory of Adam's final journal entry, a desperate, unsent message warning of imminent danger, haunted her, fueling her determination to continue probing the murky interface between corporate finance and criminality. She understood that every uncovered secret inevitably led to more questions, and that the true extent of the network behind Horizon Logistics might never be fully known. As months turned into years, the case of Adam Lewis and the ensuing scandal remained etched in the collective memory of the city. Urban Harvest Market, the once ordinary Walmart parking lot, where the investigation had taken its first fateful turn, continued to operate with an undercurrent of wary resilience. Shoppers who had once passed through the lot without a second thought now exchanged guarded looks, aware that beneath the surface of everyday commerce, dark currents of deceit could be lurking. The story was dissected in law enforcement training sessions, featured in investigative journalism pieces, and even discussed in university seminars on corporate ethics and criminology. In one final, unresolved twist that still surfaced during informal discussions among detectives, a set of encrypted files recovered from Adam's computer had hinted at a meeting scheduled to occur the very night he died, one that was never confirmed. The files suggested that the conspirators might have planned a final desperate attempt to silence any emerging evidence by eliminating the last potential whistleblower. Though no additional bodies were found, and no further arrests were made in connection with that lead, the implication was enough to keep Detective Mitchell awake on many nights, wondering if there were other layers of the conspiracy yet to be unearthed. There was no tidy, cathartic ending to the case, only a mosaic of victories and open-ended questions. For Detective Mitchell, every solved detail was tempered by the realization that corruption, once entrenched, seldom disappears entirely. The investigation had exposed a network that reached into boardrooms and back alleys, and while some of its nodes had been dismantled through the judicial process, many remained hidden behind layers of legal protection and corporate secrecy. In the end, the murder of Adam Lewis and the unraveling of the financial fraud at Horizon Logistics served as a stark reminder that even in the heart of a modern metropolis like Los Angeles, the darkest crimes could occur in the most unassuming settings. A parking lot under the glow of a Walmart sign, a break room in a busy fast food restaurant, a ledger scribbled in a quiet office. Detective Laura Mitchell continued her work, driven by the belief that every new case was another opportunity to peel back the layers of secrecy and expose the truth, no matter how elusive it might be. And so, as the city's relentless energy pulsed on, its skyline a tapestry of light and shadow, those who had been touched by the case carried its memory like a scar, a constant reminder that sometimes the most ordinary places hide extraordinary crimes. In every whispered conversation among colleagues, in every renewed effort to tighten financial oversight, the legacy of Adam Lewis lived on, a testament to the courage it takes to confront injustice and the price that is paid when the truth is silenced. Detective Mitchell's story, like the case itself, was not one of neat resolutions or heroic triumphs. It was a narrative of human frailty, corporate greed, and the complex interplay of ambition and morality. It was a story that, even as it spurred reforms and changed policies, left lingering questions about the true cost of silence in a world where every uncovered truth only opened the door to more mysteries. In the end, the case was a journey, an endless quest to shine a light on the dark corners of power, one that Detective Mitchell knew would continue for as long as there were secrets waiting to be revealed. On an unseasonably cool evening in mid-October, the steady hum of traffic and the murmur of late-night chatter filled the air outside one of New York City's busiest subway stations. Grand Central Terminal, an iconic symbol of the city's ceaseless energy, was preparing to close its doors for the night. Commuters, now fewer in number, hurried to catch the last trains, while a few night owls lingered in the quieter corners of the concourse. Amid the routine bustle, an ordinary night took a sinister turn that would soon ripple through every layer of the city's underbelly. At precisely 11:27 p.m., as the station's digital displays flickered with final train times, a piercing cry cut through the ambient noise. A homeless man, huddled on a cold marble bench near the far end of the main hall, had discovered something that made him stagger back in horror. There, partially obscured beneath a discarded newspaper and a tattered overcoat, lay the body of Leonard "Lenny" Jacobs, a 42-year-old man whose life had been as unremarkable as it was mysterious. His eyes stared blankly upward, his face frozen in an expression of profound shock. A small scrap of paper was clutched tightly in his right hand, its message scrawled hastily. They silenced truth before it spoke. Within minutes, uniformed officers rushed into the cavernous terminal. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off polished marble and glass, casting erratic shadows over the scene. Detective Mary Ann Ortiz, a seasoned investigator with the New York Police Department known for her unflinching determination, arrived on the scene. As she knelt beside Leonard's motionless form, every detail was meticulously catalogued. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned benches, no scattered belongings, only a strangely deliberate placement of the body in a quiet corner behind a row of information kiosks. The note in his hand, ambiguous yet ominous, hinted at a premeditated act designed not only to murder but to send a message. Over the course of the next few hours, as forensic teams combed the scene and tape cordoned off the area, Detective Ortiz began interviewing the sparse witnesses remaining in the terminal. An exhausted janitor recalled that earlier in the evening, while sweeping near the information desk, he had seen a man in a dark jacket pacing near one of the unused stairwells. "He wasn't doing anything else," the janitor said softly. "Just pacing back and forth, like he was waiting for something, or someone." A commuter, still shaken by the discovery, mentioned hearing hushed voices echoing off the high ceilings moments before the body was found. The accounts were fragmented, but they all pointed to an unusual presence in the station during the final minutes before closing. Leonard Jacobs was not a well-known figure, and yet, as Detective Ortiz reviewed his background, an unsettling narrative began to emerge. Leonard was an accountant who worked for a mid-sized financial firm in Lower Manhattan, a quiet man who led a solitary life and maintained a modest routine. His co-workers described him as dependable, meticulous, and somewhat introverted. However, a few close colleagues admitted that Leonard had grown increasingly agitated over the past few months, hinting at something off in the firm's finances. In whispered conversations during lunch breaks, he had mentioned discrepancies in internal reports and unexplained transfers that he believed were being hidden from the board. Though he never spoke in detail, Leonard's furrowed brow and furtive glances had suggested that he was onto something that could jeopardize not only his job but possibly implicate higher authorities. Detective Ortiz's investigation took a decisive turn when she obtained Leonard's personal belongings from his modest apartment in the Lower East Side. In a battered briefcase, she discovered a leather-bound notebook filled with precise, almost obsessive notes. Page after page contained entries of daily financial figures, annotated with colored ink and circled discrepancies. One particular entry, dated just 10 days before his death, read, "Total revenue does not equal deposited funds. Investigate the second quarter reports. There is something hidden in the transfers." The meticulous nature of Leonard's notes suggested that he had been independently verifying the firm's accounts, an unusual step for someone in his position, and that he had uncovered evidence of a systematic misappropriation of funds. As the investigation deepened, forensic accountants working with the NYPD's Financial Crimes Unit discovered a disturbing pattern in the firm's records. Over the past 6 months, significant sums of money had been diverted into accounts registered overseas. The transfers, though not enormous on an individual basis, were regular, occurring on the 10th and 25th of every month, and their cumulative effect amounted to several $100,000. The internal audit report, which had been quietly filed away by the firm's management, revealed that these funds had been shifted through a series of shell companies. The documents were unsigned and bore no official stamp, but the digital footprints confirmed that they originated from the firm's central accounting system. The scale of the operation indicated that someone in a position of authority was orchestrating these transfers to siphon money away from legitimate business operations. Detective Ortiz soon began to suspect that Leonard's discovery might have upset those benefiting from this elaborate scheme. His pursuit of the truth, recorded so meticulously in his notebook, threatened to expose not only internal fraud but also a network of corruption that reached into the corridors of power. Further evidence emerged when digital forensic specialists managed to recover deleted emails from Leonard's work computer. Among the recovered messages was one that had been sent from an anonymous account warning, "Stop looking, or you'll be the next." The stark threat, along with the handwritten note found in Leonard's grasp, confirmed that his probing into the financial discrepancies had made him a target. The investigation quickly shifted focus to the financial firm where Leonard had worked. The firm Belmont and Associates was a respectable mid-sized company that prided itself on conservative investments and prudent risk management. However, as Detective Ortiz interviewed several former employees, a murmur of discontent emerged. Some claimed that management had grown increasingly secretive and had discouraged employees from questioning certain unusual transactions. One ex-employee, who had been with Belmont for nearly a decade before resigning abruptly, recalled overhearing a conversation in which a senior manager said, "We can't let anyone get too close to the numbers. They have to disappear before it becomes a problem." The veiled reference to disappearing numbers now took on a sinister connotation in light of Leonard's murder. In a series of clandestine interviews with whistleblowers, Detective Ortiz learned that the financial discrepancies at Belmont were not accidental but were part of a deliberate operation to embezzle funds. The stolen money was funneled through a complex web of offshore accounts, disguised as legitimate investments in emerging markets. Key signatures on the digital approvals matched those of a mid-level executive named Michael Donovan, a man described as unassuming yet surprisingly influential behind the scenes. Donovan, who had long been in charge of internal audits, had been tasked with ensuring that any irregularities were smoothed over before they could attract attention. When confronted, Donovan offered little resistance, simply stating, "I was just doing my job, following instructions from above." His evasiveness, combined with his access to the sensitive financial records, made him a prime suspect in the case. Amid mounting evidence, Detective Ortiz also discovered that Leonard had been in contact with an external auditor, a consultant hired by a concerned board member to review the company's books. The consultant, a meticulous woman named Catherine Lee, recalled that Leonard had approached her with his findings. "He showed me his notebook," Catherine said in a somber tone. "The numbers didn't lie. There was a pattern that I'd never seen before. He was trying to piece together a puzzle, but I warned him that if he pursued it too far, he might upset people who had a lot to lose." Her words echoed ominously in Ortiz's mind, suggesting that Leonard's dedication to uncovering the truth had made him a liability to powerful figures whose interests were at stake. While Belmont and Associates tried to maintain its public image, the internal turmoil was palpable. Financial records from the past year revealed that, on several occasions, funds were transferred to a shell company named Mariner Investments. The name, innocuous at first glance, concealed the fact that the same account had been used to channel money out of the firm without proper oversight. Forensic accounting traced the transfers to a series of international wire transactions, with timestamps that coincided with key dates in Leonard's notebook. The correspondence surrounding these transfers was coded, and when deciphered revealed a chilling directive: ensure discretion. Eliminate the risk. The terse language left no doubt that those responsible had anticipated potential leaks and were prepared to take extreme measures to silence dissent. As the investigation progressed, Detective Ortiz began to piece together the timeline of events on the night of Leonard's death. His last known movements were reconstructed through cell tower data and credit card transactions. Leonard had left his office at Belmont at approximately 9:05 p.m. and had been seen entering the subway station shortly thereafter. Surveillance cameras in the station captured a glimpse of a man in a dark jacket trailing Leonard, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap. Although the image was too blurry to be definitive, it matched descriptions provided by several witnesses of a man who had been seen near the security checkpoint moments before the body was discovered. The evidence suggested that Leonard had been followed and that the act had been committed with calculated precision. In a desperate bid to uncover more, Detective Ortiz obtained a search warrant for Leonard's apartment. There, amidst a sparse collection of personal items, she found a locked drawer in his desk. With the help of a locksmith, the drawer was opened to reveal a collection of documents that Leonard had been hoarding: letters from an anonymous source, internal memos from Belmont's upper management, and a series of photographs taken outside the firm's headquarters. One photograph, taken just days before his death, showed Leonard standing outside the building with a man who was later identified as a consultant with ties to offshore financial operations. The consultant's face was blurred, but his demeanor was unmistakable, guarded and secretive, as if he were aware that his presence would eventually be scrutinized. At this point, the investigation had expanded beyond the walls of Belmont and Associates. Federal agents were brought in to assist with the financial tracing, and soon, the web of corruption stretched into a broader network that involved political lobbying and clandestine business deals. A confidential informant within a prominent New York-based law firm revealed that several high-ranking officials had been quietly advocating for legislative changes that would benefit companies like Belmont, changes that would, in effect, provide cover for the kind of financial maneuvers Leonard had uncovered. The informant's voice, trembling with both fear and resolve, stated, "They use the law as a shield to hide their crimes. Anyone who tries to expose them gets in their way permanently." The weight of these revelations pressed down on Detective Ortiz, who now faced the grim realization that Leonard's murder was part of an even larger conspiracy, one that involved not just a single firm, but a network of individuals determined to protect their illicit gains at any cost. The case took a dramatic turn when, during a routine follow-up, the forensic team discovered traces of an unusual chemical residue on the broken plastic found near the subway entrance. Analysis revealed that the chemical was used in specialized cleaning processes at secure financial facilities, a substance not typically found in a public space. This clue pointed to a premeditated attempt to erase evidence, or perhaps even to mark a location for a later undisclosed purpose. The detective's mind raced with possibilities. Had the perpetrators returned to the scene to cover their tracks? Or was this a signature, a silent acknowledgement that the murder was not merely about stolen money but about eliminating a potential threat? In a tense meeting with federal agents at a secure office in Lower Manhattan, Detective Ortiz reviewed the chemical analysis and the recovered digital evidence. The recovered emails, though fragmented, contained a recurring warning: "Stop your inquiries, or the cost will be irreversible." The language was measured, almost bureaucratic in its cold finality, and it implied that those responsible had the resources to silence anyone who got too close. This revelation only deepened the detective's resolve to uncover every hidden facet of the operation. As weeks turned into months, the investigation continued to build pressure on Belmont and Associates. Multiple employees came forward, some under promise of anonymity, revealing that management had cultivated an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. One former supervisor tearfully recounted being ordered to let the numbers balance themselves despite knowing that discrepancies were too large to ignore. Others spoke of sudden, unexplained dismissals of those who dared question the financial reports. Every new testimony painted a picture of a corporate culture that prized loyalty to a corrupt system above all else, where even a minor deviation from the official narrative was met with severe consequences. A breakthrough came when the cyber forensics unit, working round the clock to piece together deleted files from Leonard's computer, recovered a nearly complete draft of an internal memo. The memo outlined plans to restructure the company's accounting procedures, a move that on the surface appeared to be routine corporate housekeeping. However, when compared with Leonard's notes, it became clear that the memo was a cover-up measure. It stated that any anomalies discovered in the financial transfers were to be adjusted discreetly and that no one was to be alerted to the new protocols. The memo was unsigned, but a careful analysis of the metadata pointed to a workstation in the upper management offices, a workstation that belonged to Michael Donovan, the man previously suspected of involvement. Confronted with this evidence, Detective Ortiz and her team obtained a warrant to search Michael Donovan's office at Belmont. Inside, they uncovered a series of encrypted files on a secure server that detailed the internal transfers, along with correspondence between Donovan and several unidentified individuals discussing protective measures and confidential adjustments. One particularly damning email from Donovan read, "If any discrepancies are found, make sure they're erased permanently." The phrase "erased permanently" was now chillingly familiar, echoing the anonymous threat found on Leonard's deleted emails. This connection firmly tied Donovan to the chain of command that had orchestrated the financial cover-up and, by extension, to the motive behind Leonard's murder. With the evidence mounting, federal prosecutors brought charges against several mid-level managers and financial officers at Belmont and Associates for fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. The trial was a marathon of witness testimonies, forensic analyses, and detailed presentations of financial records. In a packed courtroom in downtown New York, Detective Ortiz took the stand to recount her investigation. Her testimony was unflinching as she described the moment she first saw Leonard's lifeless form, the painstaking work of reconstructing his final hours, and the intricate network of documents that ultimately revealed a systematic scheme of corruption. Each piece of evidence was laid out in stark detail, a ledger entry here, an encrypted email there, until the jury could no longer ignore the undeniable pattern. Yet even as several of the accused were convicted and sentenced, the case did not offer a complete resolution. The top executives at Belmont, including Richard Thompson, managed to escape the harshest penalties due to legal technicalities and the protection afforded by corporate influence. Michael Donovan, the linchpin of the internal cover-up, received a sentence for his role in the fraud, but he maintained that his actions were just following orders. The elusive mastermind behind the entire operation, whose name had never been publicly tied to the scheme, remained unidentified. Anonymous tips and sporadic communications continued to suggest that there were still shadowy figures pulling strings from behind closed doors, a network too vast and well protected to be dismantled overnight. In the aftermath of the trial, Urban Harvest Market, a nearby grocery store that had inadvertently become the locus for some of the case's early evidence, continued to operate, its bright aisles belying the dark undercurrents that had once flowed beneath its floor. The city's financial regulators implemented new policies to increase oversight of corporate accounting practices, and whistleblower protections were strengthened in the wake of the scandal. Despite these reforms, the legacy of Leonard Jacobson murder and the ensuing cover-up lingered as a stark reminder that even the most routine environments can hide corridors of corruption. Detective Ortiz, now regarded as a determined crusader for justice, returned to Grand Central Terminal on quiet mornings when the station was almost empty. She would pause at the same spot where Leonard had been found, feeling the weight of every unanswered question. The digital files, the torn notebook pages, and the anonymous threats continued to haunt her. In private moments, she'd reread Leonard's final notes, a testament to his unwavering pursuit of the truth, and wonder how many more lives had been sacrificed in the name of silence. The investigation had exposed not only the inner workings of Belmont and Associates, but also a broader pattern of systemic corruption within the financial industry. A network that, despite legal victories, still operated in the shadows of New York's towering skyline. For the citizens of the city, the case became a symbol of both vulnerability and resilience, a reminder that while even the most respected institutions can be infiltrated by greed, the relentless pursuit of truth by dedicated individuals can spark change, however incremental. As the seasons changed and New York City moved on to its next chapter, Detective Ortiz continued her work, ever vigilant. She knew that in a world driven by money and power, every uncovered discrepancy was a small victory against an entrenched system. And though the mystery of who ordered Leonard's murder and who still lurked behind the veil of corporate secrecy remained unresolved, her resolve to seek justice never wavered. In the interplay between light and shadow that defined the city, she held on to the belief that every secret, no matter how deeply hidden, could eventually be brought into the light by those who refused to be silenced. The case, with all its twists and unanswered questions, became a touchstone for reform and transparency in the financial world. Public forums, academic discussions, and investigative reports all cited Leonard's tragic fate as a catalyst for change. And while the legal proceedings had closed one chapter, the memory of that fateful night continued to influence policies and inspire new generations of investigators determined to hold power accountable. For Detective Ortiz, the story was a constant reminder that truth is often fragile, and that even in the most unassuming settings, a busy subway station, a local grocery store, a quiet corner of a financial district, there are battles being fought between honesty and corruption. Her journey through the labyrinth of evidence, from the moment she first encountered Leonard's silent plea for justice to the complex web of financial deceit that ensnared so many, was far from over. Every case, every broken piece of evidence, was a call to keep looking deeper, to question every number and every official statement, no matter how routine it might appear. As New York City continued its ceaseless rhythm, a tapestry of flashing lights, honking horns, and determined souls, the legacy of Leonard Jacobs's murder remained etched in the collective memory of those who dared to question the status quo. His story, told in hushed tones in boardrooms and public hearings alike, served as a powerful reminder that silence can be a weapon, and that the price of uncovering the truth can be tragically high. In the quiet moments of early morning, as Detective Ortiz walked the nearly empty corridors of Grand Central, she often reflected on the cost of integrity. Each shadow cast by the early light, each whisper carried on the wind through the terminal's grand hall, was a testament to the countless voices that had been stifled by the machinery of corruption. And although there would be no neat conclusive ending to the case, no moment when all questions were answered and every wrong was righted, the pursuit of justice continued. With every new case, every investigation, and every reform implemented in the aftermath, the city took one more step toward ensuring that the sacrifices of those like Leonard Jacobs were not made in vain. Detective Ortiz's commitment was unyielding. She knew that the darkness in the corridors of power might never be fully dispelled, but that the light of truth could, piece by piece, push back the shadows. In a city as vast and complex as New York, where every day brought its own challenges, her work was a reminder that even the most fragile truths could become a foundation for lasting change. There were no final triumphs here, only a continuing struggle, an ongoing narrative of human ambition, corporate deceit, and the relentless quest for accountability. In every small victory, whether it was a tightened regulation, a successful raid, or a brave witness coming forward, Detective Ortiz saw the promise that one day the truth would prevail, no matter how many secrets remained hidden in the dark. And so, as the sun rose over Manhattan and the city's pulse began to quicken once more with the promise of a new day, the memory of that cold October night in Grand Central lingered, a quiet echo of the battle between power and integrity. A reminder that every uncovered secret was both a victory and a call to continue the fight. In the labyrinth of urban life, where truth was often buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and greed, Detective Marianne Ortiz carried the torch of justice, determined to ensure that every voice, no matter how quietly it cried out, was eventually heard. In a sprawling suburban neighborhood in Northern California, Central Fresh Market had long been a local institution, a place where the hum of refrigerated units and the soft chatter of shoppers created a comforting soundtrack to everyday life. The store, with its bright aisles and neatly arranged produce, was a hub of community activity. Regulars knew every employee by name, and the comforting routine of daily shopping was a quiet pleasure in an otherwise unpredictable world. Yet beneath the veneer of normalcy, an event was unfolding that would shatter the peaceful rhythm of the neighborhood and expose a tangled web of secrets, greed, and calculated violence. On a breezy evening that blended into night without fanfare, an employee working the closing shift discovered something that would forever alter the lives of those who frequented the market. While restocking a display of fresh fruits near the back of the store, Miranda, a longtime cashier known for her warm smile and steady hands, noticed a door left ajar in the employee break room. Drawn by a mixture of curiosity and concern, she stepped inside. In the dim light filtered through the frosted windows, she found the body of Marcus Reed, the store's assistant manager. Marcus lay slumped near a stack of unopened cartons, his expression frozen in a silent plea, and a scrap of paper was clutched tightly in his hand. The message on it, scribbled hastily, simply read, "Secrets never die." The discovery sent shockwaves through Central Fresh Market. Within moments, uniformed officers arrived, their presence a stark contrast to the familiar, benign setting of the store. Detective Elena Cruz, a seasoned investigator with the local police department known for her relentless attention to detail, took charge of the scene. As she stepped into the break room, the soft hum of the refrigerators and the faint scent of disinfectant mingled with something far more ominous, the metallic tang of blood. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned chairs, no scattered belongings, nothing to suggest a frantic confrontation. Instead, every detail seemed almost too neatly arranged, as if the scene had been carefully set up to convey a message beyond a simple act of violence. Detective Cruz methodically began interviewing the employees who remained in the store after closing. Miranda, still visibly shaken, explained that Marcus had been in the back office reviewing inventory reports when he abruptly left, insisting he needed to fix something urgently. Other employees recalled that earlier that day, Marcus had seemed distracted, his brow furrowed as he pored over the day's sales figures and cash register totals. One younger employee, Darren, mentioned that Marcus had expressed concerns about numbers not matching up and had hinted that something in the accounting was off, but no one had pressed him for details, assuming it was just another one of his routine worries. Now, in the stark aftermath, every word took on a sinister weight. As the investigation unfolded, Detective Cruz scoured the store for any additional evidence. In a locked drawer in the office near the break room, she discovered a small leather-bound notebook. Its pages were filled with Marcus's neat handwriting, detailing daily cash discrepancies and a series of puzzling entries about unaccounted transfers from the register to a set of bank accounts that the company never publicly mentioned. One entry, marked with a hastily drawn question mark, read, "When the figures don't add up, what are they really hiding?" It was clear that Marcus had been conducting his own independent audit of the store's finances, a task far beyond his regular managerial duties. Central Fresh Market was a well-run operation by all outward appearances, part of a regional chain that prided itself on efficiency and community values. Yet, as Detective Cruz dug deeper into Marcus's notes and cross-referenced them with internal audit reports, a disturbing pattern emerged. There were small but consistent discrepancies in the cash deposits recorded at the end of the day. Over the past several months, these irregularities had grown in both frequency and magnitude. A forensic accountant from the police department later confirmed that while individual mismatches were minor, collectively they amounted to a significant sum, a sum that had been siphoned off into accounts that, according to the records, did not belong to the company. Meanwhile, digital forensic specialists managed to retrieve deleted files from Marcus's work computer. In one recovered email, a terse message warned, "Don't pry too deep or you'll regret it." The note, unsigned and sent from an internal account, suggested that Marcus's investigation into the discrepancies had ruffled the feathers of someone powerful. Detective Cruz also found fragments of encrypted correspondence between Marcus and an unknown contact. In these messages, Marcus had been urging caution and writing about cover-ups and hidden transfers that went beyond mere accounting errors. The digital trail painted a picture of a man who had been quietly piecing together a scheme that could implicate high-level executives. As Detective Cruz expanded her inquiry beyond the store's walls, she began to uncover unsettling links between Central Fresh Market's financial irregularities and a broader network of corruption within the regional franchise. The parent company, Evergreen Grocery Holdings, had long been lauded for its efficiency, yet internal records obtained by the police through a Freedom of Information request revealed a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts that were routinely used to reassign funds. Financial transactions marked by a series of periodic transfers occurring every few weeks without any public explanation suggested a system designed to obscure the true flow of money. These transfers were routed through accounts registered in offshore financial centers, and they were approved by a few key figures whose identities were known only to insiders. One name in particular kept reappearing in the confidential documents: Lawrence Green, the regional manager of Evergreen Grocery Holdings. Green, a man with an unassuming demeanor and a reputation for sound business acumen, was widely respected in the industry. Yet, in private memos leaked to the police, his signature appeared on a series of internal approvals that authorized the suspicious transfers. When questioned by Detective Cruz, Green maintained a calm and measured tone, insisting that the transfers were part of standard corporate practice. "We invest in futures, we diversify our accounts," he explained. But his explanation did little to dispel the mounting evidence that these transactions were far too systematic to be accidental. In a series of interviews with former employees, Detective Cruz uncovered whispers of an atmosphere of intimidation and secrecy within the company. One ex-employee, who had worked in the accounting department for over a decade, confided that management had developed a culture where questioning the books was discouraged. If you got too close to the numbers, you'd be warned. Sometimes implicitly, sometimes not at all, the employee said. There were rumors that if someone really dug into the discrepancies, they'd vanish. I always felt a chill every time I heard someone mention it. Such statements only added to the grim possibility that Marcus's diligent quest for the truth had made him a target. As the investigation progressed, Detective Cruz began to trace the digital footprints of the mysterious emails. The encrypted messages and deleted files pointed to an IP address that originated from a high-end office building in downtown Oakland, a building known to house several financial consultancies and law firms that advised corporate clients on tax matters. With the help of cyber forensic experts, Cruz was able to link the IP address to a financial consultant who had worked with Evergreen Grocery Holdings on several projects. The consultant, who had since left the company under ambiguous circumstances, was identified as Victor Morales. When questioned, Morales was evasive. He claimed that he had only provided routine advisory services and that any irregularities were merely bureaucratic quirks. But his defensive posture, coupled with inconsistencies in his account, raised more questions than answers. At the same time, Detective Cruz received an anonymous tip in the form of a letter slipped under the door of her temporary office. The letter, typed on plain paper, warned, "Curiosity leads to destruction. Let this be your final warning." There was no signature, no indication of its origin, only a chilling reminder that those behind the cover-up were watching and were willing to use intimidation to keep their secrets hidden. The message galvanized Cruz's resolve rather than deterring her. In a quiet moment later that night, she reviewed every scrap of evidence, every financial record, and every piece of digital correspondence. The cumulative effect was undeniable. Marcus Reed had stumbled upon a deliberate scheme of embezzlement that involved not only the internal workings of Central Fresh Market, but also extended upward into the corporate hierarchy of Evergreen Grocery Holdings. In the days following the tip, Detective Cruz focused on building a case that could connect the dots from the missing funds to the individuals in power. She obtained search warrants for several offices in the regional headquarters of Evergreen Grocery Holdings. In one nondescript office in Oakland, investigators discovered a locked safe containing stacks of bank statements and internal memos. Among these documents was a ledger that meticulously tracked the series of transfers from the store's cash registers to offshore accounts, and it was signed off by a senior executive whose identity, though redacted in public filings, matched the internal memos that implicated Lawrence Green. The ledger revealed that over the course of 6 months, hundreds of thousands of dollars had been diverted, a sum that was alarmingly large for a single store's operations. During a tense interrogation, Lawrence Green was asked directly about the discrepancies. His calm facade wavered momentarily, and he offered a rehearsed explanation about strategic financial management and long-term investments. When pressed further about the recurring transfers and the associated memos, he simply replied, "I follow orders from the board. My job is to ensure that our numbers stay within acceptable ranges." His ambiguous responses did little to quell the suspicions that had been building among the investigators. In parallel, detective crews revisited the surveillance footage from Central Fresh Market's parking lot and back entrances. One particular clip captured a man, dressed in a dark, understated suit, moving with a quiet determination through the area near the employee entrance. The figure's face was obscured by the angle of the camera, but his gait was measured and purposeful. When combined with witness testimony, describing a similar figure seen in the parking structure, the image took on a menacing quality, suggesting that this individual might have been responsible for ensuring that Marcus Reed's discoveries remained buried. Cruz's team enhanced the footage using advanced digital techniques, but the quality remained too poor to yield a clear identification. Yet even that grainy image was enough to link this mysterious figure to a known associate of Evergreen Grocery Holdings, a man with a reputation for handling difficult situations quietly and effectively. As the investigation reached a critical juncture, Detective Cruz's team managed to recover more data from Marcus Reed's encrypted communications. One particularly damning email, recovered from a backup server, contained a stark warning: "If you keep digging, someone will pay the price." The tone was unambiguously threatening, and it confirmed that Marcus had been seen as a threat by those who controlled the financial misappropriations. The email did not include a signature or any identifying details, but its contents resonated with everything Detective Cruz had already uncovered. With mounting evidence, federal financial investigators were brought in to conduct a parallel inquiry into the offshore transfers. Their report, presented in a series of closed-door briefings, confirmed that the funds had been systematically diverted through a network of shell companies. The report implicated several key figures, including the financial consultant Victor Morales and certain unnamed board members. Although the report stopped short of directly linking any individual to the physical act of murder, it established a clear motive. Silence was a commodity, and those with power would stop at nothing to prevent the exposure of their illicit gains. At this point, the investigation took an unexpected twist. A former employee of Evergreen Grocery Holdings, who had been laid off shortly after raising concerns about the discrepancies, came forward anonymously. In a recorded statement provided to the police, the ex-employee detailed how management had enforced a strict policy of non-disclosure regarding internal finances. He recounted a conversation in which a senior manager had explicitly stated, "Any leak of this information will be dealt with permanently." The weight of this testimony was staggering. It provided the missing link between the financial irregularities and the extreme measures that had led to Marcus Reed's death. Detective Cruz, bolstered by this new evidence, compiled her findings into a comprehensive case file. The case now spanned not just the confines of a single grocery store, but reached deep into the heart of corporate corruption that had infiltrated an entire regional enterprise. The narrative was clear. Marcus Reed had been a diligent and brave man who had stumbled upon a scandal so vast that it threatened the very integrity of his company. His murder was not an isolated act of violence. It was the culmination of a deliberate and systematic effort to silence any dissent and to keep a lucrative scheme hidden from public scrutiny. In a final coordinated operation involving federal agents, local police, and financial crime units, search warrants were executed at multiple locations. Offices at Evergreen Grocery Holdings in Oakland were raided, and a trove of documents was seized, including emails, financial ledgers, and internal memos that detailed the series of offshore transfers. One particularly damning memo outlined a plan to rectify discrepancies by diverting funds to secret accounts and ensuring that any potential whistleblowers were removed from the equation. The memo was unsigned, yet its language was chillingly clear. It confirmed that high-level executives had not only been complicit in the financial fraud, but had also sanctioned measures that made silence a prerequisite for continued profit. The subsequent legal proceedings were lengthy and complex. Several mid-level managers were indicted on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. In court, forensic accountants testified about the precise nature of the financial discrepancies, demonstrating how small irregularities, when compounded over time, amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Witnesses described a climate of fear within the company, where questioning the numbers was tantamount to challenging the authority of those in power. Despite the overwhelming evidence, some of the top executives managed to avoid harsh penalties by invoking legal technicalities and corporate protections. Their role in the scheme remained partially obscured, leaving a lingering sense of injustice in the eyes of many. Even as a number of convictions were secured and sentences were handed down, the case left many questions unanswered. The identity of the man seen in the parking structure, who may have been responsible for physically ensuring that Marcus Reed's investigation did not proceed, was never definitively established. The possibility that a professional enforcer had been hired to clean up loose ends added an element of ongoing menace to the proceedings. Furthermore, the anonymous tip messages and encrypted emails hinted at the existence of an even broader network of corruption, one that extended beyond the regional operations of Evergreen Grocery Holdings and into the higher echelons of the financial world. In the months following the trial, Central Fresh Market reopened its doors to a community that was forever changed by the tragedy. Shoppers moved through its aisles with a quiet caution, the familiar routine of everyday life now shadowed by the memory of what had transpired. For many local residents, the case of Marcus Reed became a somber reminder that even in places designed for the mundane tasks of daily existence, a grocery store, a parking lot, the forces of greed and corruption could strike with deadly precision. Detective Elena Cruz continued her career with an unyielding determination to expose injustice wherever it lurked. The case had left its mark on her, a constant reminder that the pursuit of truth was an endless journey, fraught with challenges and often mired in moral ambiguity. In her quieter moments, when the demands of the job had faded and the city's nighttime hum settled into a low, persistent cadence, she would reflect on Marcus's meticulous notebook and the boldness with which he had pursued the truth. Though his life had been cut tragically short, his commitment to uncovering corruption had sparked reforms at the local level, prompting new oversight measures for financial transactions within regional businesses. Federal and state regulators, prompted by the revelations in the case, introduced stricter guidelines for auditing financial records and enforcing transparency within corporate structures. Public forums were held, and community leaders joined in discussions about how to prevent such abuses of power in the future. Although the legal process had produced some measure of accountability, many believed that the true cost of the corruption would continue to echo throughout the region for years to come. In the end, the case of Marcus Reed was not defined by a neat conclusion or a singular act of heroism. It was a mosaic of courage, greed, and the indomitable human spirit, a reminder that even in the most ordinary settings, the struggle between honesty and deception can have extraordinary consequences. Detective Cruz's investigation, while successful in exposing a web of financial malfeasance and silencing, left behind unresolved threads. The shadowy figure in the parking garage, the anonymous warnings that continued to circulate, and the lingering sense that the deeper corruption had not been entirely eradicated. As Central Fresh Market returned to its routine and the city of Northern California pressed on with its daily rhythm, the memory of that fateful night endured in quiet conversations among those who had been touched by the tragedy. In the boardrooms of regional companies and in the halls of regulatory agencies, discussions about ethics and accountability were infused with a renewed urgency. For Detective Elena Cruz, every new case was a reminder of the work that still needed to be done, a call to vigilance in a world where truth was often hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and fear. There was no grand finale, no moment of cathartic closure that swept away all doubts. Instead, the case lived on as a persistent testament to the complexity of human nature and the enduring challenge of exposing corruption in even the most unassuming places. In the interplay of light and shadow in a simple grocery store parking lot, in the quiet determination of a dedicated detective, and in the whispered stories shared by community members, the legacy of Marcus Reed remained, a reminder that every uncovered secret was both a victory and a promise to keep fighting for a more honest world. And so, as the seasons changed and life continued its ceaseless march in Northern California, the memory of that rainy night, when a routine shift at Central Fresh Market turned into an investigation that shook a community, persisted like a quiet refrain. It was a story without a tidy ending, a truth that defied simple resolution, and a challenge to anyone who dared to look behind the facade of everyday life. For Detective Elena Cruz, the pursuit of justice was not measured by the verdicts in a courtroom, but by the ongoing commitment to ask tough questions, to trace every anomaly in the ledger of life, and to honor the sacrifices of those like Marcus Reed who dared to seek the truth, even when silence came at a deadly price.